Session of the April 5th, 2022 meeting to order at 6:08 p.m. All council members are present. Sorry we're running a few minutes late tonight. Welcome to all of our guests and visitors. We provide an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on any agenda item or during the hearing of visitors portion of the agenda. On items other than public hearings, speakers will be allotted 1 3-minute presentation, regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. If you're here to speak and have not filled out a registration card, please see the City Secretary staff at the registration table outside of the auditorium so that staff can contact you if necessary. If you have handouts, please let us know at the beginning of your presentation and staff will distribute those to council. If you're unable to approach the podium due to physical limitations, a microphone is available to be brought to you. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item of business is to consider the minutes of the March 15th, 2022 regular City Council meeting. These minutes were provided to you in your meeting packet. Are there any corrections? If there are no corrections, the minutes will stand approved as submitted. And I have 2 proclamations today. The first is the proclamation to our Public Health District Director, LaShonda Mallory Horn, for the Public Health District for National Public Health Week. So please meet me at the podium. Hey, team. These guys have been through the ringer the last 2 years. Can we just give this team a round of applause? Thank you. It's been an interesting 2 years in public health. It's my honor to read this proclamation. I, Dylan Meek, by virtue of the authority vested in me, as the mayor of the city of Waco, do hereby proclaim April 4th through 10th, 2022 as National Public Health Week in the city of Waco and urge the people of Waco to join with the city council, city staff, and me in applauding the efforts of the public health professionals of the Waco-McLennan County Public Health District. These dedicated professionals have helped our communities prevent, prepare for, withstand, and recover from the impact of a full range of health threats that we have faced. Support and inclusion within our social communities can have a positive effect on our mental and physical health, which allows us to give back to our community and make it stronger. And while there are public health resources available where we live, we acknowledge that some barriers may make it hard for residents to utilize these services, including physical, mental, financial, cultural, and language barriers. We call upon the people of Waco and McLennan County to observe this week by helping our families, friends, leaders to better understand the value of public health. We also support the various opportunities to adopt preventative lifestyle habits in view of this year's theme, Public Health Week, Public Health is Where You Are. The dedication of these healthcare professionals, together with scientific and technological advances, have played a major role in reducing and, in some cases, eliminating the spread of infectious disease and establishing today's disease surveillance and control systems. We recognize the need to raise awareness and are committed to assist in establishing the solid foundation needed for a healthy community and nation. Best wishes for a successful week, and testimony whereof witness my hand and the seal of the city of Waco this 5th day of April 2022.
Thank you, Council, for all your support over the last year. What a difference a year makes. We got this proclamation via Zoom last year, and we're happy to be here with everyone in this community. It's been a wonderful first year here in Waco. But I really want to acknowledge these 3 people sitting right here and the other 80-plus public health professionals you have working here in the county. Stephanie Alvey, our Assistant Director, Dana Carpenter, our Health Equity Promotion and Prevention Manager, and Dr. Vidahesh Shah, our Senior Epidemiologist. Thank you all for being a wonderful group of people to work with. And thank you to the city for being a great place for us to live and work. And we're going to keep trying to make McLennan County and Waco the healthiest community in Texas. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you guys so much. And the next proclamation is for the week of the young child. Is the person I'm presenting this to come up? Thank you. Hey. Thank you so much for your work in our community, and I'll read this now. I, Dylan Meek, by the virtue of authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Waco, do hereby proclaim April 2nd through the 8th, 2022 as the week of the young child in the city of Waco, and urge the people of Waco to join with the city council, city staff, and me in recognizing United Way of Waco-McLennan County and the McLennan County Child Wellbeing Movement and the National Association for Education of Young Children, and celebrating the week of young child, April 2nd through April 8th, 2022. Community residents and local organizations are calling attention to the need for more high-quality early learning opportunities and stronger supports for McLennan County families that in turn can be a foundation of well-being for more than 21,000 children between the ages of 0 and 5 in McLennan County. The public policies that support early learning for all young children are crucial to young children's futures and the prosperity of our society. The City of Waco expresses our sincere appreciation and thanks to the teachers, nonprofit organizations, and early childhood professionals, healthcare professionals, and others who make a difference in the lives of young children in McLennan County. In testimony whereof, witness my hand and the seal of the City of Waco this 5th day of April, 2022.
So I'm Wendy Ellis, I'm the CEO with United Way of Waco-McLennan County, and we greatly appreciate the proclamation and the recognition of the Week of the Young Child. We spent the last 2 years working with members of the community to really understand the needs for our youngest children and their families and how to improve the quality of life for our most vulnerable residents. And so we're excited that next month we'll be launching a community-developed, community-led action plan on helping to improve in all areas, including early childhood education, health, and financial stability for our families. So thank you very much for this recognition.
The next item we have is our public hearing, 2022-199. Ranisha Hudnall is going to be giving this one for us.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and council members. This is a public hearing to receive comments on an amendment to the Consolidated Plan for 2014 through 2018 and 2019 through 2023, and also 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 Consolidated Annual Action Plans to provide earned income, program income to NeighborWorks Waco for the acquisition of real property. The proposed amendment will provide spending of federal funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Community Development Block Grant program income as follows. Provide funding up to $145,178.35 for acquisition of an affordable housing property for rental to low to moderate income persons. The property will be used for rental and lease to those who are at 60% or below of the area median income. This supports the strategic plan that addresses the mixed-max housing units and makes units available to those at lower incomes. The amendment was placed out for public comment from March 16, 2022 through April 14, 2022. Notice was placed in the non-legal section of a Waco Tribune Herald newspaper, posted on the city's website, and also on the city's bulletin board. To date, we have received no comments.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? I will open a public hearing for comments. I have one card, and that is for Mr. Ephraim Herring. Good evening, Mr. Herring.
Good evening, council. My name is Ephraim Herring. I live at 1044 Chestnut and 1046 Chestnut. I got a major problem with this proclamation. This issue here is because I read your reason for that grant. Actually, it's a grant. And I listened to your work session today. And it was kind of shocking what I heard, but let me go ahead and tell you what That money could be used for street construction and sidewalk improvements. That money could also be used for street lights, youth programs, renovation to facilities in eligible areas. Let me see. District 1 has been considered a red hot district for as improvements needed. This is on your website. So I'm trying to figure out why Neighborhoods Waco is getting $142,000 to acquire property, but it's not in the area that y'all pointed out they need major assistance. And the one that really got me is, you got Doris Miller YMCA right there in the Western area, as I call it, the service center. It's not open right now. So the last time I talked to someone about it, they needed money to do repairs on it. So why that $142,000 is not given to that project there, which fits right into the category of the CDBG funds? I totally object to this. I think it's not fair to the taxpayers who money it belongs to, not Neighborhood Waco. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here to speak on this item? We will close the public hearing, council is not required to take any action at this time. So the next item to consider is public hearing 2022-200.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, this is a public hearing to consider a resolution approving the following subdivision plats. Preliminary plat of the Hilltop Heights Edition and final plat and construction plans of Thanksgiving Park Edition, Lot 1, Block 2. By a vote of 7-0, Plan Commission recommended that the subdivision plats and construction plans be approved.
Are there any questions for staff? We'll open a public hearing for comment, and I have one card. And that is Mr. Can I probably mispronounce it? Mr. Robert Reed. Is it real?
Reed.
Reed. Sorry, I apologize about
Terrible
that.
handwriting.
No.
Thanks for letting me express my concerns about this. I grew up in Waco, lived there a long time, and when I see these kinds of developments proposed, it just kind of reminds me of a pattern that we've seen in this city for a long time, where all the new shiny developments come out on the periphery, the city expands. Meanwhile, we have a lot of blight in the interior of the city. And as this process unfolds, the city accrues more and more financial liabilities in terms of the infrastructure that has to be built to service these new areas further and further from the center of the city, and is still on the hook for these other areas in the center of the city, where now we're seeing tax values go down in blighted areas. I mean, think about 19th Street, think about Valley Mills Drive, think about how we see this pattern, you know, in the 60s, the Lake Air Mall was kind of like the new thing on the edge of town. In the 80s, when I was a kid, it was the Richland Mall. Now it's the Syntex Marketplace. So my question to the council is, has there been any serious cost-benefit study confirming that the city is going to be able to continue paying for the expansion of infrastructure with the Thanksgiving Park Edition? And more generally, the pattern of the city of Waco expanding like this, is this something that we've done a study to know that there's long-term viability to that activity? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this item? I will close the public hearing and I'll ask for a motion.
I move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
There's some valuable questions that the speaker raised. City Manager Ford, I wonder if you could speak into some of those dynamics.
He's gathering his thoughts. I like to speak on that too.
Great.
Because I mean, that's something that we've cared about since I've been on council, and something that's been, I think, a passion project of this entire council. And I think some evidence of that is the TIF 4 that we've created in our recent housing study that we've been developed that shows that there's a significant lack of quality housing stock in this community. And so a lot of the strategies that we've tried to implement are that I believe include a redevelopment strategy and a strong investment in the core of our city, and has been certainly a priority. In fact, I would say I hear from many residents of Waco that it's an overemphasis in the core of the city, and my response to that is we have to have a balanced approach. I think we need to ensure that we're providing access to good quality housing in the greenfield, but we also have to work strategically to ensure that there's economic vitality and strong housing stock in the core of the city. And the code enforcement discussion and the housing studies discussions that we've had previously to that show that this council has deep commitment to that. And I love that you're here to speak on this, because it's actually rare that we get people coming with this concern. So I'd love to grab a coffee with you, Mr. Reed, and even discuss this further, because healthy core development is something that I'm really committed to. So your interest in this subject is shared by me, and would love to talk it out further. And I didn't mean to cut off your question, Kelly, but just to speak on behalf of some of the work that I've personally been committed to for the last 5 years, ensuring that the core is revitalizing in a healthy way, in a sustainable way. But also, one of the things that we have seen in the core is significant rise in property taxes, actually. The values have skyrocketed, and part of that is because of a lack of quality housing stock. So ensuring that all parts of our city have housing stock is something that I'm attracted to, as long as we're putting an emphasis on the core, as well as a thoughtfulness to our expansion. Bradley, you probably have a more sophisticated and better response than
You've covered from a...
Can I have, just real quick, Mayor Meek, I completely agree with obviously we are deeply committed to the core of the city, and representing a core district, I care about that so immensely. But I think the piece of that question that is interesting to me is, as we continue to develop on the outside, that is more law enforcement, that is more fire, that's more infrastructure, that is kind of eking towards the edges, and there is a real cost there. So I'm wondering, City Manager Ford, if that's the component that you could speak a little bit more specifically to.
Yeah, I think y'all both covered some really important policy issues, but the matter in front of us today is a final plat. And a final plat is a ministerial act by the council. And in the review of that, all we're determining is, does the plat conform with the subdivision regulations of the city of Waco? And the staff has indicated it's in full conformance. So the policy matters of fiscal impact or some of the other concerns, which are very valid, big picture policy concerns aren't relevant to the plat that's before us today. Because it's a ministerial act in review of the subdivision regulations. So I think the points raised by the speaker and each of you as council members are valid, but not necessarily within this conversation, within a different conversation.
Mayor, I would just add to that one of the requirements of these plats is that they are subject to the impact fee that City Council adopted last year. That does help offset some of that cost for the infrastructure, because of these areas outside that don't have the infrastructure. So that is one of the requirements that they'll be subject to.
It's something that we'll have the privilege of continuing to discuss the big policy issue as we go, but I think there's a lot of validity to what you bring up, and look forward to those discussions. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Please poll the council.
Hill. Yes. Rodriguez. Aye. Bordereau. Yes. Palmer. Aye. Holmes. Meek.
Yes. Motion carries, and we'll move to public hearing 2022-201.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, this is a continuance of a public hearing to consider an ordinance providing for the extension of certain boundary limits of the city of Waco, Texas, and the annexation of certain territory consisting of approximately 215.88 acres of land, more or less being all of that tract of land in McLennan County, Texas, out of the Carlos Ocampo survey, abstract number 32, and being part of that called 222.816 acres of land described in a deed to Crystal Springs Farms, LLC, as recorded in McLennan County Clerk's document 2015-015-999 of the official public records in McLennan County, Texas, and being located between Bagby Avenue and Interstate Highway 35 southeast of the intersection of Gateway Boulevard and Bagby Avenue. And further located within Waco's extraterritorial jurisdiction, which said territory lies adjacent to and adjoins the present boundary limits of the city of Waco, Texas, providing for the designation of industrial as a comprehensive plan land use designation and the designation of M2 industrial district zoning for a portion of the 215 acres tract consisting of 192.76 acres, providing for the designation of office industrial flex as a comprehensive plan land use designation and the designation of O2 office resident district zoning for a portion of the 215.88 acre tract consisting of 23.11 acres, assigning the annexed territory to City Council District 3, amending City of Waco Precinct 60 to include the annexed territory, directing that the city precincts district map shall be revised to reflect the change in providing voting locations at any City of Waco vote center, providing that said territory bears pro rata part of taxes and entitling inhabitants to all rights and privileges of citizens and binding inhabitants to acts and laws of the city, adopting a service plan, providing a severability clause, providing for publishing of the ordinance, providing penalties therefore, and finding and determining the meeting at which this ordinance is passed is open to the public as required by law. By a vote of 11-0, Plan Commission recommended approval of the annexation, land use designation, and zoning.
Are there any questions for staff? We will open the public hearing for comments, and I have one card on this one. Nope, no cards on this one. Is there anyone here to speak on this item?
Yes, my name is David Mercer. My address is 1927 Columbus Avenue. Foremost, I'd like to apologize to Mr. Peters for making him have to read that one more time than he would have if we'd gone the normal route. But second to that, I'd like to thank him and staff for working with us since the last council meeting to help get us comfortable with the annexation process. They did great work in helping us get there. So that's it. Thank you.
Sir, is there anyone else here to speak on this item? We'll close the public hearing and I'll ask for a motion.
Move for approval on first reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Hill. Yes. Rodriguez. Aye. Boderoop. Palmer. Holmes.
Aye.
Meek.
Yes, that motion carries. The next item is the consent agenda, which consists of resolutions 2022-202 through 2021. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll move for approval.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Bearfield.
Yes.
Rodriguez. Aye. Boderoop. Palmer. Holmes.
Aye.
Meek.
Carries, and the next item is ordinance 2022-222.
An ordinance of the City of Waco, Texas, providing the Code of Ordinances of the City of Waco be amended by revising Section 28-247 and Chapter 28 zoning of said code. Providing a zoning map shall be changed so that certain property described as lots 5B, Block 6, Farm Lot 14A, and lots A, B, 7 through 13, and 0.043 acres of abandoned alley, Block B, Huff Ayers subdivision, property ID number 178274, and lots A1 through C1, A2 through B2, and 0.062 of abandoned alley, Block 20, Johnson Tract, property number 178621, known as 703 through 721 South 5th Street, and 702 through 726 South 6th Street, shall be changed from C2 district classification and be designated as C4 district classification, respectively. Providing for penalties, providing a severability clause, and finally determining the meeting at which this ordinance is passed is open to the public as required by law. This ordinance was approved by a 6-0 council vote on first reading on March 15, 2022.
I have one card for this, and that is Mr. Brad Harrell.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Waco City Council. My name is Brad Harrell. I reside at 14 Timber Ridge Trail in Lorena, Texas, and I represent Haresh Jathani and is the applicant here to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? If none, thank you, Mr. Harrell, and I'll ask for a motion.
Move for approval on second reading.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Yes. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Boderoop. Palmer. Holmes.
Aye.
Meek.
Yes, that motion carries, and we'll move to ordinance 2022-223.
An ordinance of the City of Waco, Texas, providing the Code of Ordinances of the City of Waco be amended by revising Section 28-247 and Chapter 28 zoning of said code. Providing the zoning map shall be changed so that certain property described as Lot 10, Block 3, Queen Crest Edition, known as 3501 Ethel Avenue, shall be changed from R1B district classification, become and be designated to R2 district classification. Providing for penalties, providing a severability clause, and finally determining the meeting at which this ordinance is passed is open to the public as required by law. This ordinance is approved by a 6-0 council vote on first reading on March 15, 2022.
Is there a motion?
Move for approval on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Yes. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Boderoop. Yes. Palmer. Holmes.
Aye.
Meek.
Yes. Motion carries, and we'll move to ordinance 2022-224.
An ordinance of the City of Waco, Texas, providing the Code of Ordinances of the City of Waco be amended by revising Section 28-247 and Chapter 28 zoning of said code, providing that the zoning map shall be changed so that certain property described as lots B4, C4, 5, and A5, Block T, Montgomery Heirs Edition, known as 2036 and 2040 South 12th Street, shall be changed from C5 to district classification and become and be designated to O2 district classification, providing for penalties, providing a severability clause, and finding and determining that the meeting at which this ordinance is passed is open to the public as required by law. This ordinance was approved by a 6-0 council vote on first reading on March 15, 2022.
Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Yes.
Aye.
Boderoot,
Yes.
Palmer. Holmes.
Aye.
Meek.
Yes, that motion carries, and we'll move to ordinance 2022-225.
An ordinance of the City of Waco, Texas, providing the comprehensive plan be amended to change the land use designation from medium-density residential office flex to office industrial flex on property described as 4.5 acres of land being part of Lot 3, Block 1 of the Central United Methodist Church, Edition Number 2, recorded as McLennan County Clerk's Document 2014-030013 of the Official Public Records of McLennan County, Texas, known as 4.5 acres out of 2301 West Loop 340, provided that the Code of Ordinances of the City of Waco be amended by revising Section 28-247 and Chapter 28 zoning of said code. However, the zoning map shall be changed, the property described above shall be changed from O1 to C2 district classification, providing for penalties, providing a severability clause, and finding and determining the meeting at which this ordinance is passed is open to the public as required by law. This ordinance was approved by a 6-0 council vote on first reading on March 15, 2022.
Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Yes.
Aye.
Boderoot,
Yes.
Palmer.
Aye.
Holmes. Meek.
Yes, that motion carries, and we'll go to ordinance 2022-226.
An ordinance of the City of Waco, Texas, providing the Code of Ordinances of the City of Waco be amended by revising Section 28-247 and Chapter 28 zoning of said code, providing the zoning map shall be changed that certain property described as Lot 6, 7B, 24, and C25, Block 13, Witt Edition, known as 315 and 319 Lottie Street, shall be changed from C3 district classification and become and be designated to R2 district classification, providing for penalties, providing a severability clause, and finding and determining the meeting at which this ordinance is passed is open to the public as required by law. This ordinance was approved by a 6-0 council vote on first reading on March 15, 2022.
Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Fairfield. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Boderoot. Palmer. Holmes.
Aye.
Meek.
Yes, that motion carries, and we'll move to ordinance 2022-227, and I do have a card from, I believe, Audrey Watson? What's her name? Watson.
My question was answered. Thank you so much.
All right, is there a motion?
Mayor, would you like me to read the caption?
Yes.
An ordinance abandoning an approximately 25-foot wide portion of the right-of-way of Mary Avenue between South 23rd Street and South 26th Street, and further described as being the southeast 1/4 0.699 acre of Mary Avenue located in the City of Waco, McLennan County, Texas, retaining a general utility easement, finding no duty to maintain, authorizing the city manager to execute quitclaim deeds, providing a severability clause, and finding and determining the meeting at which this ordinance is passed is open to the public as required by law. This ordinance was approved by a 6-0 council vote on first reading on March 15, 2022.
Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Please poll the council.
Yes. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Boderoot. Palmer. Holmes.
Aye.
Meek.
Yes. Motion carries, and the next item of business is the hearing of visitors. During the hearing of visitors section of the agenda, we provide an opportunity for the public to present concerns or address issues that are not matters for consideration listed on an agenda. Council is unable to conduct discussion, but will listen, ask staff to look into concerns, and provide follow-up. Please provide registration information so that staff can contact you if necessary. If you have handouts, please let us know at the beginning of your presentation, and staff will distribute those to council. If you're unable to approach the podium due to physical limitations, a microphone is available to be brought to you. You'll have 3 minutes for comments. When called to the podium, please state your name and address for the record. If you're speaking on behalf of a group of 10 or more individuals present, please have those persons stand at the beginning of your comments, and you will be given 10 minutes to address the council. Please note, if you stand in support of a person getting 10 minutes to speak, you're forfeiting your right to speak on that item. For any person addressing the council through the use of a translator, the speaking time will be doubled to accommodate the translation services. While public discourse is very important to the council, we have to maintain order in meetings so that all persons may be heard and city business may be conducted. So if directed by me, the Sergeant of Arms shall remove from the council meeting any person who, while addressing the city council or while attending the meeting of the city council, makes impersonal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, becomes boisterous, or makes unauthorized remarks from the audience, claps hands, stomps feet, whistles, yells, or makes similar demonstrations. And the first card I have tonight is Mr. Jeffrey Vitarius, and I believe he's speaking on behalf of 10 or more people. And since we have several cards tonight, I'm going to read up who's on deck so the next person can be ready to go. And the next card I have is Victoria Brumbaugh. And if I mispronounce names, I'm very sorry because sometimes I'm not good at that. Good evening.
Good evening. And if the people who sign, well, the two people with 10 people are right after another. So if it's okay, we'll just have all the people who sign the yellow cards stand at the same time. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you sign one of the yellow cards, if you could stand up, please. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. We are here today to recognize Transgender Day of Visibility, a day set aside to acknowledge the success of trans and gender diverse communities and raise awareness about trans justice. If you ask me, it's unfortunate that our trans siblings only have a few days set aside each year, and as some of my trans folks joke, my trans friends joke, every day is Trans Visibility Day when you are visibly trans. Thank you for, but here we are. Thank you for listening to us and keeping an open mind to the issues and requests that we bring before you. As I'm sure you're aware, recently there have been efforts to silence our community across the country. In Florida, my son could cause a lawsuit against his school district if he mentioned myself or my partner and another parent took offense at that discussion. Unfortunately, today we found out that that might be considered here in Texas as well. Here in Texas, there have been attempts to consider gender-affirming parenting child abuse. The intent of these actions is clear: to silence us, to scare us, to erase us from the public square. We are here today in part to show that these efforts will not succeed in Waco, and to ask you in joining us in making that clear. The reasons for Waco to embrace this community are too numerous to count. Tonight you will hear from members of the trans community, mental health professionals, and faith leaders as to why this community deserves the dignity of recognition and proper care. I do want to make sure and bring to your attention a statistic that propels me into action. According to the Trevor Project, a queer youth attempts suicide every 45 seconds. That means in the course of each 3-minute hearing, 4 queer youth will attempt suicide. 4 lives may be lost, 4 families devastated for each speaker you hear. I also want to share the collective words of the bishops of the Episcopal Church. I'll read them now. In light of the baptismal covenant's promise to see Christ in all persons, and the recent and any actions by elected officials in Texas, Alabama, Arizona, Idaho, Iowa, New Hampshire, Michigan, Missouri, Florida, Arkansas, Ohio, North Dakota, Mississippi, South Dakota, Nebraska, Indiana, South Carolina, and any other states, municipalities, and school districts targeting transgender children and their families, we, the bishops of the Episcopal Church, gathered at Camp Allen, Texas in March of 2022, voice our love and continued support for all persons who have identified as transgender or non-binary and their families. We decry legislative initiatives and governmental actions targeting trans children and their families. We urge all in our church to create safe spaces and shield all people from harassment based on gender identity. I hope you will join us in extending an embrace to this community on the edge of erasure, a hand extended in friendship and affirmation to that struggling youth, that isolated adult, to your queer neighbors, friends, and family. Waco Pride Network has a set of actions that we feel you could take to affirm this community's place in Waco. These are but the first steps, but they are meaningful to us. We know fulfilling these requests will take courage. We just ask that your courage match ours in coming before you and sharing our names and addresses in commitment to this cause in times such as these, where our very existence is under assault. First, we ask the Council pass a proclamation recognizing Pride Month. It has been 53 years since Stonewall, 53 years of our struggle for civil rights, and we believe that that struggle deserves to be recognized. Second, we ask that the city pass an inclusive non-discrimination ordinance. I have provided a copy of an ordinance recently passed in one of our peer cities, Denton. This would ensure that queer people are protected against workplace and housing discrimination. Third, we applaud the city's ongoing equity efforts, and we note its preparation of an economic development strategy. We ask that queer voices and issues be explicitly incorporated into those efforts. This may look like a variety of things. The city's equity officer, once they are located, could be charged with bringing queer voices to the table. Queer inclusion as an economic development strategy could be considered. A board or commission could be formed to make sure these issues are front and center. We believe that equity work must fundamentally recognize the intersectional impact of race, gender identity, sexuality, language, and disability, to name a few factors. Equity must embrace everyone and their unique circumstances and challenges. Finally, we have a personal ask of you all, that you use your voices, that you use your considerable platforms to raise queer voices and issues. Each of you has a voice far louder than any of us gathered here. Please use that voice to help us. We believe that these efforts will not only benefit our community, but the whole of Waco. Affirmative welcome is quickly becoming an expectation of young professionals and large corporations that might be looking to invest on the I-35 corridor. SpaceX sponsored last year's Pride. We cannot be expected to join the larger markets in Texas without adopting their pro-queer stances. In all of this, we are not asking for expressions of your personal opinion, but rather a public expression of our existence and our right to be a part of this community, our right to be seen, our right to be heard, and our right to be affirmatively welcomed in Waco. Thank you.
Next we have Victoria Brumbaugh. And on deck we're going to have another Victoria, Victoria Volker.
Hi, I'm Victoria Brumbaugh. I currently live in Temple, 7419 Winchime Way, but I'm going to be moving here soon. Jeff ripped off my joke, though, so I'm going to tell it again. On March 31st, it was the Trans Day of Visibility. It's a day where we were asked to raise awareness of transgender people and celebrate trans people's lives and accomplishments. It's a day meant to instill trans people with pride and encouragement. I am transgender. I am visibly transgender. Every day is Trans Day of Visibility for me. That's both bad and good. Being visible both in life and online invites attacks from people. I see the stares in my direction, the finger pointing, the looks of derision. I hear and feel the sting of insults, the muffled laughter, the vitriol, and the threats. In 2022, trans people have been attacked by their state governments in this country. Almost 300 bills considered anti-LGBTQ+ have entered state legislatures for debate. Most of them strongly targeted transgender people, and more specifically, transgender minors. Not a single one of these bills used peer-reviewed science and were instead driven by personal bias by the sponsors for reasons that seem to be more political than anything else. In fact, It should be noted, all of these bills were roundly denounced by an overwhelming majority of every major medical organization in this country. I am not fond of the fact that debating the rights of trans people in this country involves calling upon science, but here we are anyway. In this current climate, being ourselves, being transgender is a political act. The mere act of existence shouldn't be political, but here we are anyway. These bills don't even have to pass to do damage to our community. The fact that people are debating the right for us to exist as ourselves in public does harm. Just talking about trans rights and lives in Austin or any other state capitals hurts us all, especially trans kids. The hate and derision filters down from parents and peers, from bad faith, biased media, and other sources. As the saying goes, it rolls downhill, and trans kids are feeling it. It's hard to be trans in this world today. Family and friends don't always understand. There's always so much pressure to not be yourself. We are told we are selfish when we transition. We are asked why we are hurting those we love when we come out. Important people in our prior lives don't want to be seen with us. We often know we can't tell our whole families or all of the people in our lives. We know what some will say and or do. We don't want trouble. We just want to live. Kids get it much worse than adults. At least as adults anyway. We have agency and independence. Children do not always have such things, and we all know how cruel kids can be to one another. I'm sure each and every one of us can think of a time in their young lives when they were bullied or ostracized by their peer groups. Lost my place. With the extra negativity trickling down towards our children from the hierarchy above them, I can only imagine how difficult it can be. It was tough enough for me growing up and being told constantly I was gay or a girl. Bullies meant it to hurt me, and it did. I was othered. I was an outcast.
Please wrap up your comments when you get a chance. The time, I believe we're out of time.
Was that one of the 10s?
I don't know. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's one of the 10s. I apologize.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Mayor.
I'm sorry. Carry on.
That's all right. Bullies meant it to hurt me, and it did. I was othered, I was an outcast, I was alone. Kids don't need extra help bullying kids, and yet once more, here we are anyway. Through therapy and personal growth, I learned some things. First, I learned to forgive them. Second, I could at least laugh about being called a girl or gay. I mean, they turned out to be kind of right on both counts. In a weird way, those memories can at least be viewed through a filter of affirmation and humor now. I knew, not felt, but I knew I wasn't a boy by the time I was 9 years old. Unfortunately, I also knew I could never reveal the truth to my parents. Even before the constant right-wing culture war against Lgbtq plus community, I knew it wasn't safe to come out to them, to tell them that they have a daughter and not a son. I prayed nightly, begging God, begging the universe to allow me to wake up a real girl in the morning. My prayers were never answered. I tried to hide my identity, not just from them, but I tried to hide it from myself. It was very difficult. It was depressing. I had to shove it down to the deepest, darkest place I could find in my soul. I didn't feel right, but I had to do it in order to survive. I got pretty good at it after a while, probably too good, actually. But after the months and years, it tore apart my psyche, and I couldn't deny myself anymore. I didn't have a particular turning point or an inciting incident. Eventually, the secret I had held for so long couldn't be denied. I realized I had to be happy, I had to be myself, I had to transition. I knew if I did not, it was a one-way trip to the grave. I hated myself. I hated myself because I was not strong enough to be who I was expected to be. I hated myself because I thought being trans was a weakness. I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only person like me. I was miserable living a lie, suicidal. I didn't want to upset my world, my friends, my family, my child, or my wife, but I realized if I didn't transition, I would die. No one wanted that scenario, especially me. Since my transition, all the people who have remained in my life saw how my disposition changed, how my soul lightened. A load had been lifted from my very core. I didn't have to pretend to be anything anymore. I could just be me. Remaining friends and family told me they saw that change in me. I was visibly brighter and happier. I was myself. I was trans. I mentioned before being visibly transgender was both bad and good, and I listed some of the bad stuff. But to leave us all here with a more positive feeling, here's some good. I have found a community I didn't have before I came out, a community that doesn't judge me for who I am, a community who embraces my imperfections and values my experiences. Now that I have found love for myself at last, I feel like I have to be an example of that love. I am completely out to the world, not just here in these chambers, but in all aspects of my life. I am visible. Because of that, people come to me. They ask me if I can help them with their friend or their family member. Sometimes it's just about themselves. They want help and advice about transitioning. I remember that feeling of deep isolation and loneliness, and I never want a single person to ever feel that way again. Sometimes I help just by being myself in public. I can teach others it's not weird and that we're just regular people. This is actually something our whole LGBTQ+ community does every day. We can teach people that respecting pronouns is no big deal. It's no imposition. It's just basic respect for a fellow human. We can teach people that trans rights aren't special rights. Trans rights are human rights. Just because a group has its rights acknowledged, it doesn't take away from anyone else's. It's not pie. No one gets a smaller piece if we treat each other with dignity and respect. Love is important. Community is important. Acceptance is important. I'm trying to be an example for my trans siblings. I want to show them that life is good after transition, that it's never too late, and it's worth all the difficulty just to be happy. Visibility is important, and this is why I think the Trans Day of Visibility is vital to Waco and why we're here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Victoria Volker, followed by Matthew Palmer.
You get two Victorias back to back, you're pretty lucky. My name is Victoria Volker. My pronouns are she, her. I live at 2708 Gorman Avenue. I'm a provisionally ordained member of the United Methodist Church. Provisionally ordained, yep. Working on my Master's of Divinity. I'm a co-pastor of the Lady Justice House Church here in Waco. And most importantly, I'm a queer woman completely in love with my partner, who is a trans man. And he's not here today to show off his brand new, really great mustache, but another time. I promise it's worth it. When Oliver and I moved to Waco 2 years ago, I expected to hate it here. I assumed it would be a minor pit stop among our journey and that there would be nothing and no one here for us. Because the thing about Waco is that unless you already fit the white, straight, Jesus-following Baylor mold, the world outside of here views us as bigoted and backwards. My mom calls it wacko for a reason. This is the Waco that I expected when we moved here. But it turns out that there's a Waco I wasn't expecting. There is a Waco full of vibrant, beloved, queer people and their affirming friends and family. There is a Waco aching for liberation, a Waco full of people who have been harmed by our town, our churches, our businesses, our schools. And yet it is a Waco full of people who have stayed and showed up despite the harm. This is the Waco I know. This is the Waco I love. This is the Waco where my beloved partner was able to come out as a trans man, and where our best friend has felt safe enough to live her beloved, glorious trans woman beauty into the world, and where I have been able to start a house church for queer folks longing to connect with God and one another. There is a proud, loving, rainbow Waco right under our noses, if only we are willing to loosen our grip on power and privilege and open our hearts to a God who looked at creation, at you and me and all of those assembled here and said, this creation, my creation, is good. The trans and queer members of our community are beloved children of God who are bravely showing up to make our community a safe place for all of us. The queer members of our community are living into the gospel of John chapter 10, verse 10. I'm almost done, I promise. You can't run me off. Where Jesus tells me that he came so that we may live life and live life abundantly. Our Waco queer community is brave enough to believe that in the here and now of this town, we can have life and have life abundantly. I can only ask now if we are willing to risk our safety, our families, our livelihoods, and our faith for the promise of abundant life now. What are you willing to lose? Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Matthew Palmer, followed by Judith Hardy.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Palmer and I live at 2704 Herring Avenue. My pronouns are he, him. I have a bachelor's in religion and a master of divinity from Bright Divinity School. My graduate studies provided me with opportunities to be shaped by the professional lives and teaching and experiences of genderqueer, gender nonconforming, and trans persons. So I speak tonight as a professionally trained theologian, biblical scholar, and a Waco resident who deeply cares about the well-being, safety, and flourishing of my LGBTQ neighbors, family, and friends. I've come this evening to voice, alongside those gathered here tonight, issues present in our city that need to be addressed through funding, planning, ordinances, and symbolic gestures like lighting up the I-35 bridge with rainbow lights for pride. Now for the first matter. Equity is one of the guiding values for making decisions and developing the city of Waco. I want to impress upon city staff and the council that if equity is one of your guiding values, then I ask you to embody this commitment by issuing a proclamation recognizing pride in Waco's LGBTQ+ community. It is quite astounding but not surprising that Waco, which prides itself on leading the charge of best-in-class services and policies for medium-sized city, still has not recognized pride in its queer residents. Second, a strategic goal of the city is race equity, but you cannot separate race from gender and gender identity, and trans and queer identities in particular. To put this more clearly, we can look at the compounding effects of the intersectional identities of race, gender, and gender identity and the violence against Black trans women whose life expectancy is only 35 years. To seek racial equity is to seek intersectional equity by taking into account the compounding identities of race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, disability, education, socioeconomic status, age, and so forth, in making decisions and working for the rights, protections, and inclusion of all Waco residents and the queer community in particular. So I ask that the city incorporate LGBTQ+ residents into the city's ongoing development efforts and ensure queer Wacoans are given space and voice to shape the future of Waco's political, economic, social, and geographic landscapes. Third, I ask the city to immediately adopt an inclusive non-discrimination ordinance that explicitly includes LGBTQ+ residents as a protected class. We don't suffer from lack of examples here. Many of our peer cities have taken meaningful action to make their communities more inclusive and to celebrate their queer residents. Most big Texas cities are leading the way by having non-discrimination ordinances that explicitly include LGBTQ+ residents as a protected class. Waco is woefully behind as a city when it comes to affirming, celebrating, and taking care of our queer residents. I look forward to seeing the work you do to better address these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next we have Judith Hardy, followed by Abby Waters. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Judith Hardy. I live at 125 Sterling Ridge, one of those outlander annexes. I am pastor at Central Presbyterian and stand here on behalf of our belief that all of God's children matter and need to be seen. I want to thank you, council, for being here to serve the people of Waco, and I want to thank those who are here to stand up for LGBTQ, for human rights, both here and beyond. I pray we all become willing to grow, willing to love, willing to move forward to support safer, healthier, kinder ways, ways that will become guideposts of how we treat and care for one another here in our neck of the woods. What I'm asking is something that I ask of myself, of my kids, of my churches, of my teams. As a pastor, I ask it for the sake of Christ, who died trying to change this world. As a citizen, I ask it for the sake of humanity, for the sake of democracy itself, where each one matters, where each one can be seen and heard. What I ask first is for you to listen, learn, and let God use each of you in each of your circles and upon each of your platforms. Let God use the change in you to be an example of love, care, respect, acceptance, and affirmation. God does not need another bully pulpit. Instead, use yours to foster an ethic of respect. Next, as you continue working to develop Greater Waco, increase the diversity and the fullness of your conversations. Include the LGBTQIA+ community members on the panels, the boards, the teams. Invite them into your conversations. And finally, please pass ordinances for inclusion and protection in the workplace and in our community. I've been a pastor to trans youth and adults, to many on what is already a difficult journey of self-discovery, especially in what we call the Bible Belt. I've known folks who have survived conversion therapy and conversion camps, and some who didn't survive. And I'm thankful that my church, my denomination, PCUSA, speaks out against conversion therapy and for a change to full inclusion for all God's children. I've had kids coming to me thinking that they were broken. They are not. And I am grateful that they came to me because I was able to have a voice to affirm them, a voice to tell them that God accepts them and loves them, just as God made them. A voice with some authority that says that the church was wrong, that the Bible never said homosexuality was wrong, that the word itself and even the concept is not there. But I'm sad to have witnessed the harm done, often in the name of God, by a culture focused on anything but God. What can God do for me? How will God bless me? How much more does God like me and my kind? No. This is not the way of Waco. This is not the way of the community that has welcomed me. I hope it will not be the way of the community that is here to welcome a future.
Thank you. Next, we have Abby Waters, followed by Kimberly Tribideau. Good evening.
Hello. My name is Abby Waters, and I currently reside at 1912 South 5th Street. I'm omitting my apartment number for safety purposes. Waco, Texas 76706. I thank you for your time today. Upon graduating in May with a master's degree in social work, I will be establishing residency here in Waco and began my career in trans-affirming social work. Today, I am not here, though, to speak to you about how my life matters as a queer, trans, non-binary individual. I'm not here to speak to you about the importance of non-discrimination laws for the LGBTQ community, for that is the minimum that is needed to show our community that Waco values the dignity and worth of a human being. Today, I want to share with you a statistic that I came close to being a part of this time last year due to a transphobic climate that was never addressed in my community at Baylor. 40% of trans and non-binary individuals are more likely to die by suicide when compared to their cisgender counterparts. More than 52% of trans and non-binary young people in this country seriously contemplated death by suicide just this past year. 52%. 46% of that is trans women. This is due to harassment, rejection, isolation, loneliness, bullying, and anti-trans legislation that is pushed from politicians for power. Yet the number one protective factor for LGBTQ individuals is a sense of belonging and peer support groups. One of the values that has been bestowed upon me time and time again has been resilience. Resilience and strength that I put into practice this morning for the 116 microaggressions that I experienced from an environment that has been built for cisgender folks. All this before noon today. My hope is that as I become a constituent in this community, I hope to work alongside you and the community behind me to enhance that sense of belonging that greeted me when I first moved here from the East Coast. Last year, some of my colleagues and I completed a community needs assessment on mental health services for the LGBTQ population in the Dean Highland area. Kelly, I have that for you if you'd like it. One recommendation, though, that was gleaned from that research was a need for a coalition that consisted of key stakeholders in the community that would collaborate and advocate for the needs of the LGBTQ individuals and families in order to move towards a more sustainable and equitable community. We all have an opportunity in this room to use our voice and our positions of power, I'm almost done, in the community to work alongside each other. Your positions, however, are imperative, and I urge you to see my face and the rest of the trans and non-binary community recognizing that there are human beings behind the policy and funding that you have the privilege to contemplate. I'm not here to ask you to recognize my existence, but instead work tirelessly to create a community where we can thrive. Trans-affirming care saves lives, and my presence here today is proof of that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Kimberly Tributo, followed by Veronica Pinales. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Good evening.
My name is Kimberly Tripoto, LCSW. I live at 450 Sturgis Street, Robinson, 76706, and I work as a therapist in a medical setting in East Waco. Most of my work in transgender care is from my early career as a policy coordinator for PFLAG National. Puberty suppression treatment is reversible and rare. So rare, Republican Governor Cox of Utah is quoted as saying, 4 kids and only one of them is playing girl sports. That's what all this is about. 4 kids who aren't winning trophies or taking scholarships. 4 kids who are just trying to find some friends and get through each day. Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. I want them to live, and all the research shows that even a little acceptance and connection can reduce suicidality significantly. In my early career, I saw the trauma prevention puberty suppression provides for grounded young people with much certainty of their identity. This is not a step any physician or loving parent takes without ample reflection. Risk-benefit analysis happens continuously with every specialist along the way. The Endocrine Society, the Association of Doctors for Hormone Regulation, advises for the care of youths during puberty, an expert multidisciplinary team, thorough options on fertility preservation prior to initiating, monitoring requirements to assure patient health are benchmarks of care in puberty suppressive treatment. If complications manifest, course of treatment is altered or abandoned. This is a careful process with knowledgeable teams providing care of these patients. The hoops a patient is required to jump through are daunting, allowing only the patient certain of the need for medical intervention to forge ahead. Obstacles existed prior to any political involvement in the matter. From a mental health perspective, gender and sexuality affirming care allow for congruence, self-actualization, individuation, authenticity, releasing shame, values clarification, identity discovery, acceptance, reduced trauma, safety, autonomy, and more. Every professional association of psychotherapists supports gender and sexuality affirming care. Without affirming care, the gravest risk is a loss of a teenager's life to suicide. The Trevor Project says that more than half of transgender and non-binary youth contemplate suicide, and they are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. Lack of affirmation increases suicide risk. Other risks for transgender youth are homelessness, abuse, bullying, hate crimes, isolation, career obstacles, and more. How certain must a young person be to knowingly, bravely face that risk? All our children deserve better. My soon-to-be adult son with autism does not pursue typically masculine activities. He is artistic, gentle, soft-spoken, and giggly. My daughter has alopecia universalis, which means she has no hair, and she is often misgendered for a boy. May we shed the preoccupation with gender expectations which cause my children and others to face exclusion. When we look at healthy behaviors in societies, political othering leads to harm. It fuels hate and further marginalizes minority populations. Segregation, religious persecution, relocating people into boroughs, ghettos, reservations, concentration camps, genocide, and more. So much of our brokenness as a society can be traced to limiting minority access. Let Waco rise above and be a beacon of healthy community with room for diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Veronica Pinales. And thank you, followed by Margaret Bossler. Good evening.
Mayor, council members, my name is Veronica Pinales, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm currently a student at Baylor University, but more importantly, I'm a queer Filipino-American woman. Please don't hold that against me. I'm testifying today to show my support of my trans brothers and sisters and to show that we, Waco's LGBTQ community, are an active, present, and powerful part of everyday life here in Waco. This morning, I woke up to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's name flooding my news notifications about how he wants to make it a top priority in Texas's next legislative session in January to replicate the Don't Say Gay bill that was recently passed in Florida legislature. So let me ask you this. How does this law prohibiting classroom discussions on sexual orientation or gender identity, as well as any teachings supposedly not age appropriate to our youth, do anything but perpetuate the cycle harming LGBTQIA plus youth, as well as furthering the disaster that is already our public school education system? See, I go to Baylor University, a mere 10 to 15 minutes away from where we all sit today. If there is anything that their religion taught me, it's that I don't think God has a sexuality. But if she did, she would be the greatest damn ally that ever existed. She. Let that sit with you for a minute. Pronouns matter. Legislature should not represent special interests or special politicians. Legislature should represent the people, just as you before me should be representing the people of Waco, including those who identify with the LGBTQIA community. So I turned 21 the other day. And my favorite thing that I have ever learned as a 21-year-old is that there really is no liberation of the few. We are not free unless we all are. I stand before you today, honestly, a super tired college student, because my trans sisters and brothers are hurting, and I will not sit back while you and your systems and attempts at law and policy perpetuate the idea that humanity is conditional based on misconceptions that too many politicians nationwide refuse to unlearn. So I encourage you all to take the steps to ensure that trans individuals, especially our trans youth, have the support and validation to exist as they are, as their whole selves. And that goes for every individual that is marginalized in this city. The steps everyone is asking of you today are frankly not anything special. They are the bare minimum. Partisanship should not be held at a higher importance than any individual's right to an environment where they can exist and be supported as they really are. For it was never about bathrooms, just as it was never about water fountains. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next we have Margaret Bossler, followed by Alan Northcutt.
Hi, my name is Margaret Durham Bossler, LCSW, pronouns she, her. I live at 3020 Clydesdale Way in Waco. Like I said, my name is Margaret Durham Bossler. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a therapist at Waco Family Medicine. I'm speaking today in my role as a mental health professional, but I do not speak on behalf of my employer. This past Thursday, March 31st, marked the 11th annual Transgender Day of Visibility. In honor of this event, I'd like to speak to the importance of being affirmed, seen and affirmed for who and what we are. Humans by nature are wired for connection, and our reality is solidified by what is reflected back to us. As Kathleen Gilbert, PhD, professor of applied health science at Indiana University explains, quote, "We make sense in a social context, and it may be hardwired into us to have those who support and care for us confirm the reality we are trying to construct," end quote. Practically, this means that we experience isolation and rejection when what we know to be true of ourselves is not validated or at least accepted by others. This dynamic is understood to be a major factor in the high rates of mental health concerns among transgender and gender diverse youth. Specifically, these youth have been found to experience rates of depression and anxiety almost 10 times higher than their cisgender peers. Research estimates prevalence of serious consideration of suicide among transgender and gender diverse youth ranges from 54 to 82%, with estimates of suicide attempts among this group ranging from 29 to 40%. However, research has routinely demonstrated the reduction of mental health concerns, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempts when these youth have access to gender-affirming medical care. In fact, substantial benefit to psychological health has been shown after as little as 6 months of access to pubertal suppression. Similarly, a 2019 study demonstrated that after 1 year of gender-affirming hormone therapy, transgender and gender diverse youth reported rates of suicide decreased by 75% as compared to rates of suicidality reported prior to this access. There is no debate among medical and mental health experts. Gender-affirming care is widely recognized as both medically necessary and life-saving. Every major mental health professional organization opposes legislation and policies intended to restrict access to gender-affirming care. Similarly, medical professional associations that advocate for youth access to gender-affirming care include the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics, among many, many others. I'm almost done. Given the tremendous benefits that have been demonstrated when transgender and gender diverse youth and individuals at large have access to gender-affirming care and the broad support from the medical and mental health professionals, it is clear that greater harm is likely to come from denying or restricting access to these medically necessary and life-saving interventions, and from communities and environments where trans lives are not affirmed. So I call for you to do your own part in affirming and supporting trans and gender diverse people by passing non-discrimination city ordinance protecting LGBTQ people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Dr. Alan Northcutt.
Alan Northcutt, and there is a handout. First, I really want to thank and congratulate the City of Waco for the installation of the solar panels on the roof of the new fire station at 25th Street. I think this wasn't really reported because they're quite difficult to see, and I have a photo in your handout, but they are there. We've been calling on this since about 2018, and we're really pleased to see this happen. But going forward, we call on the city to install solar on all new city construction. You know, in a multi-million-dollar building, this is really a small part of the cost. Also, to speed up the permitting of residential and business solar, and to pass a permit requiring solar on commercial construction, say medium to large size businesses. I wanted to comment about the drought contingency discussion today from the working session. I included maps that are more up to date and show that the situation is actually worse than noted earlier at that session. The drought has gotten worse, and the seasonal precipitation outlook map has also gotten worse. And I note that this is all happening with only 1.1 C degree of warming. We're projecting up to 2.4 or more by 2100 if we don't cut emissions. So this process is going to get worse. I have a quote here. This is from the U.S. National Climate Assessment number 4, talking about the southern plain states, which includes Texas. Quote, Studies project less future soil moisture with future conditions possibly drier than anything experienced by the region during at least the past 1,000 years. So we expect worsening of the drought and water shortages. And finally, a very important report from the IPCC was just released, and I have a handout. It's for policymakers on mitigation of climate change. It's short and very readable, if you can take a look at that. But the highlight is greenhouse gas emissions are still increasing. They're the highest levels in human history. They conclude that unless there is immediate and deep reduction in emissions across all sectors, and that includes cities, that includes Waco, 1.5C is beyond reach. So the situation is very dire. So we call on the city to look at all actions, all expenditures through the lens of the climate crisis and how it will impact. So finally, a quote from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He said this about the IPCC report, quote, "The jury has reached a verdict, and it is damning. We are on a fast track to climate disaster." End quote. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Northcutt. Next we have Meg Wallace, followed by Ephraim Herring.
Hi, my name is Meg Wallace. I'm the director and organizer of the Amberley Collaborative. The Amberley Collaborative is a nonprofit whose mission is to strengthen community support for people experiencing challenging and isolating life circumstances. Growing up transgender can be very challenging, and isolation makes it even harder. Transgender youth are at high risk for depression, anxiety, and suicide. They are often bullied, and many are rejected by their own families. Transgender youth are far more likely than their peers to become homeless and far more likely to wind up in foster care. Transgender youth fare a whole lot better when they have their family's support, and transgender youth and their families will be stronger for their journey when they have their community's support. The transgender youth and their families of Waco have the Amberley Collaborative support.
Thank you. Next we have Ephraim Herring, followed by Cal Schmumpf. No, that's bad, but that's what. Thanks, Ed. Sorry about that.
My name's Ephraim Herring, and I'll make this. I was watching your work session, and when he was doing the code enforcement section of it. My family's been dealing with code enforcement ever since 1994. So there was a couple questions that y'all asked that you didn't get answer to. Because I've been doing this investigation. I started after 2018 when I wrote a letter to Bradley Ford telling him I was going to start the investigation on what's going on. So let me break it down to you real simple. There are houses in District 1 and in the city of Waco that can be updated and brought to code to be affordable housing. But the city of Waco doesn't offer them a grant. These people are already struggling as is. They can do see the Waco off the loans. If you're already struggling, why would you need a loan on a house? They watch. The developers comes in and get grants. What a grant is, grant means they ain't got to pay it back. Back in when Wilbur Austin was right, we talked about this, why these grants were not given to the citizens. Same grants, that's their money. They pay in the taxes. Other reason, when you get a letter from code enforcement, you get a little note at the bottom saying, if you don't correct this problem, it's $1, anywhere from $1 to $1,000 a day. And one of my letters my mother got said $1 to $2,000 a day. Her monthly income on Social Security was $975 a month. So when you get senior citizens right now, the city of Waco has a large amount of senior citizens that's coming to Waco, that's living in Waco right now. They get paranoid. And then they condemned the house. When she found that somebody could repair a house for some money she could afford, they told her, the code enforcement told her, no, it's too late. They tore her house down. The sad part about that is the house was torn down and the city charged her $4,000. And repaired the house would have been $2,000. She's not the first one that happened to. So what I'm saying to you is, if you're serious about getting affordable housing in the city of Waco, why don't we start offering grants to the residents? There are houses there to be repaired. I've talked to numerous ones, though. The same thing that happened to me has happened to them. So anybody can come and say, there's a problem with that house. I watched it happen to my neighbor. Because they were having a fighting contest, a war on neighbors. You've seen it on TV. So they call the city up and say, my neighbor's got a problem with his house. City came out there, inspector came out there and condemned him, but they'd start writing up the house. Then they rubbed out that neighbor right across the street. So you had two people fighting each other on city codes and ordinances. We have to do better. If city gonna pass a proper and fair inspection of houses, the code enforcement has to be fair, and they gotta represent the community. Because right now the code enforcement in my neighborhood doesn't look like me. Have a blessed day and be safe.
Thanks, sir. The last card we have is Cal S. I'm not going to try that one again, sorry. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Callum Schlumpf, and I live at 710 South Avenue K in Clifton, Texas. I'm a local community organizer, a construction contractor, and a board member of the City of Clifton's Main Street program. I'm not, sorry, lost my spot. Clifton has a population of about 3,500 people, and as such, I am not unused to being the only trans person people think they know. But roughly 1 in 100 people in the US are actually transgender, so it's unlikely that I am the only one. I bring this up as a community organizer involved in local government who is openly transgender, because over and over again, as I have worked to make my neck of the woods a little safer for people like me, I hear, well, I just don't know who this would apply to. To those who would say such, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've been a resident of Central Texas for 29 out of my 30 years. I grew up in a time when it was expected that the gays and theys would move away as soon as they could. But I love my home, and I work tirelessly to make it a better place for everyone. And I wasn't any less trans when you didn't know I was here. And I am here with one simple request. When concerns about the complicated issues of gender and sexuality come before you, remember that this does affect your community. Remember that we came to you to introduce ourselves and to ask to be allowed to participate in these discussions. Look at these things like you would engineering or construction issues. If a question came up about the specifications needed to make a building safe, and there was not someone on hand with the expertise to answer those concerns, you would not make a decision. You would table it and seek counsel with the engineers who can explain the impacts of your options. Do not let fear keep you from asking questions. To quote author Rick Yancey, our enemy is fear. Blinding, reason-killing fear. Fear consumes the truth and poisons all the evidence, leading us to false assumptions and irrational conclusions. Do not let fear of the unknown harden your hearts and blind you to the resources and counsel that you have available to you. Do not let fear disguise the fact that the conversation that we are having is about whether or not Texas is a state that believes in personal freedom. I am grateful to have this time today to speak for those in my community who cannot, and I hope my words honor those of us we cannot even count who will never speak again. Thank you kindly for your time.
Thank you. That is the last card I have. Is there anyone else here to speak in the hearing of visitors? If not, we will close the hearing of visitors, and I'll ask for any council member reports on committees, boards, commissions, or liaison visits. And I'll also ask if there is a scheduling for future agenda items. If not, there being no further business, we will adjourn at 7:32. Thank you so much to everyone who came here tonight. Good evening.